Okay, it is February 16th. We are in Havana. We are interviewing J.B. Martin. He was born January 19th of 1924.
Yeah.
People interviewing are Ashley Bressler and Alex Womack. JB was part of World War II. And he participated in Battle of the Bulge, and he was located in Europe. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Drafted? How did you feel when you were drafted?
Well, I felt like it was my duty.
Was your family proud of you or scared?
Well, they was proud of me, but I had one brother, and he was in the Army, and unfortunately he was killed in France.
Where were you living at the time of being drafted?
Where was I, what?
Living?
In Topeka, Illinois.
Were you born there?
No, I was born in Taylorville.
What was your training like?
You mean length of training and such?
Yes.
Well, I was first went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Was 13 weeks of basic training there. And from there to Missouri. And Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And from then on, I was shipped overseas.
How did you adapt to the military life?
Well, pretty good.
Did you have any friends or?
Oh, yes. I had one very good friend right from here from Havana, who was in the same unit that I was in, all the way through.
What unit were you in?
755th Field Artillery Battalion.
And in that, what do you do?
I helped fire the big howitzers, which are big guns. They shoot a shell about 6 inches across and weighs 100 pounds. So they had a lot of firepower.
Did you ever have a good luck, something for good luck that you did before each day?
No.
No?
Just
Did you see any combat?
huh?
Did you see any combat when you went overseas?
Yeah. 2 years of it. All the way from the Normandy beaches in France to the Elbe River, where we met up with the Russians.
Did you ever get injured?
Yeah, I got my back broke from a bomb.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
By letters.
Was it ever hard to get your letters sent out to them?
No, our mail was pretty good.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
A unit citation, presidential unit citation, which meant that your outfit was one of the top outfits in the Army, which is highly sought after. Yeah.
Did you ever feel any pressure or stress during the war?
Oh yeah,
How did you deal with it?
I just had to do what you could and put the rest of it behind you. That's because it had to go on.
How's that? Fine. I like to do that every day. Well, they only have you 3 times a week, though.
What did you do for entertainment?
Don't worry.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of entertainment.
So that the girls can walk you. Okay?
We'd went to just get together and play some cards and that sort, maybe, but there wasn't a whole lot of entertainment.
And bring yourself back to the other side, right? Can you? Yeah, and then another hit. That's up to you.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Huh?
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah. The day I was discharged,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was discharged at Camp McCoy in Wisconsin.
How did being discharged make you feel?
Well, starting a new chapter of your life. It was back to civilian life that you had almost forgot about, you know.
How did your family react when you returned home?
Oh, they was really happy. Because as I said, my only brother had been killed. And when I got back home, why, they was really happy.
Did you ever keep in contact with your friends in the military?
Well, I did for quite some time with some of them. And then they died or drifted away, and, you know, as life goes on.
What did you do as a career after the war?
What did I do what?
As like a job or?
I ran a blacksmith shop. Now, I don't know whether you know what that means or not, but I did work for farmers, and my father was a blacksmith ahead of me, and I followed him in that. takes a long time to training to be a blacksmith. And you don't find them anymore.
What types of things did you do as a blacksmith?
Sharpened plowshares or made anything that they needed made out of iron. And then I welded with electric welders. I did that for years.
Did your experience in the war make you think differently on life?
Think differently what? About what it was all about?
Yeah.
Well, Hitler had led the people of Germany the wrong direction, and it was almost a war of survival. But it had to be stopped, what Hitler was doing. And that's what we was out to do. And we did. I was no hero, but I served with a lot of guys that was.
What was the Battle of the Bulge?
Huh?
What was Battle of the Bulge?
Well, that was kind of Hitler's last attempt to win the war for Germany. And in the Ardennes region of Belgium, he had massed a lot of men and equipment, and he came through to split the Americans or the Allies up and still try to win. And it was in the wintertime he came through and pushed everybody back. They took a large area, and the area that he took was like a big bulge in the line, and that's why it was called the Bulge. But it was a battle that lasted for a long time.
Is that when you were injured?
Yeah. I was injured Christmas Eve in 1944. My job was that I had to deliver messages or orders from one unit to another. And on Christmas Eve in 1944, the Germans had Bastogne, Belgium, which was a center of railroads and highways that crossed through it. And it was very vital to have that town because of transportation. And Hitler wanted it, and that was one of the things this Bulge was supposed to have done for Germany, and they surrounded that town, the Germans did, cut us off completely. And I was sent in there on a Christmas Eve with orders to our commanding general. And when I was in there, the Germans bombed Bastogne, and I got caught in it. So I was in I was in the 3rd Army when our commanding general was Patton, George Patton. But then the unit that was in Bastogne of Americans was the 8th Corps of the 3rd Army, and that's where I had to go that night when I got caught in the bombing.
Did you ever feel like you wouldn't be able to go home?
Huh?
After being injured, did you feel like you wouldn't be able to go home at any time?
I didn't know. All of us kind of thought that, you know, we was there until the war was over. And make the best of it.
That's all I have for today.
Okay. And we've been married 64 years. Yeah, as I said, she's here. You know, a lot of ups and downs. 64 years. But
What was the hardest thing about you being in the service?
the hardest thing I think was being away from your family and, you know, your home, you might say.
How did you cope with that?
Well, just had to kind of put it aside, you know. There wasn't a whole lot you could do about it. But just kind of go along. I wasn't by myself. Everybody was in the same boat, you know. So you just had to get along.
Did you write letters to stay in touch with everyone?
Oh yeah, I wrote a lot of letters home. We had good mail service.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, in the Battle of the Bulge, I know that took place during the wintertime in the Ardennes there. I'm just kind of curious though, like, what did people do to keep warm, and how did you make sure that, you know, you didn't freeze out there?
Well, for protection, of course, when you was in combat, was to dig a what they call foxhole, but they were just a trench in the ground, and that would of course get you out of the wind, and then you had a blanket and a shelter half with a piece of canvas, and then your overcoat, army overcoat, and you just done the best you could. It was cold and snow, and at one time there it got down to 20 below. But I got my fingers froze and my feet. But I got that down here in Missouri, of all places. Down, you know where Fort Leonard Wood is?
I sure do.
I was there for a long time.
Now, I noticed that your biography said that you were Field Artillery.
Yeah.
What was it like as far as like transporting equipment through that forest in the snow and everything? Like, was that very difficult to do?
Yes. But they had the these howitzers that I had were big guns, you know, and they had like a bulldozer, you know, or tracked like a dozer that pulled that gun when you moved it from one place to another. Of course, the gun was on wheels for transportation, but the snow and ice, you know, was like that. The tracked outfit would slip and slide, and it took a long time to get any distance. But
what was your job as part of the field, you know, with the field artillery? What exactly did you have to do with the weapon? What were you in charge of doing?
I was in charge of firing it. Now the weapon is to start with, the projectile is put in the gun and then pushed up into the lands and grooves, and then behind that a guy puts the powder in, and the powder was in bags, silk bags, and depending on how much powder you put in as to how far that would shoot that projectile. And then you close the breech of the gun, and my job then was to put in it was like a blank 30 caliber shell, and put that in there, and then when it come time to fire it, what they call a lanyard, and it was hooked to when you pulled it, it banged that shell, and that of course fired the powder, and that was my job. Was when they hollered fire, I pulled the lanyard.
Did you have to wear earplugs? I mean, I'm sure that was very loud.
I never wore earplugs,
No?
but you stood on your toes. You didn't stand flat-feeted. You stood flat-footed. It'd just about paralyze you. That concussion, you know, with that charge. But
So you stood up on your tiptoes like this?
I kind of stand up on, like on the ball of your feet. And get you off of. But if you stood flat down, it'd really whack you. Now that bothered my hearing too.
Oh, I'm sure.
And ever since then, I've had, you know, don't have the hearing I had before.
Now, how would you go about firing at a target? Did you have a specific point that you were firing at, or like how would all that work?
Well, it was they needed them shells to fall at a certain spot. Well, that was called back in to the firing data, and they figured out how far that was and how much powder it would take to push that shell there, and then they set, and I was never up on that really good, but they set post when you got the gun in position, and they was set out there, and they lined up, and that they used those to figure out how to point that gun. Now there was guys, that's all they did was figured that out, you know, and tell you what setting to set it. Then you set the setting on that, you know, which would turn a gun or elevate it. And then it was loaded and fired, and they were very accurate. see, it would throw that shell for as much as 5 miles. But it took a bunch of men to fire those weapons. It wasn't a one-man job.
Were you behind the U.S. Army lines or in front of the lines?
Both.
Okay. So when you fired, sometimes you were firing to kind of clear the way for the infantry going in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we fired cover for. But then during the war, they came out with a new fuse for that projectile, and it was a radio control. And anytime it got within so many feet of an object, it would trigger it.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that was, they fired them and it got so far over the ground and a fire, and then all that shrapnel would go down, and it was deadly.
Mm-hmm.
George Patton was a Third Army general. He called it a funny fuse, but they called it a posit fuse. And it was, you didn't have to be exact on target, because any time it got that close to the ground, or that would trigger it and it'd explode.
Mm-hmm.
And explode from up in the air over and down was a lot more deadly than to hit the ground and explode. But everybody had to do his job, and they became really efficient at it too. But the cold and the snow was hard to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that's what Hitler was figuring on, that he wanted bad weather and snow and everything. But in Bastogne, I was trapped in there for all the time it was surrounded. And then they finally got a unit in there, the 101st Airborne Division came into Bastogne.
Mm-hmm.
And Christmas, we didn't have nothing to eat. And they parachuted food and ammunition and stuff into us. And that was quite a sight.
Now, was there a feeling throughout the whole Battle of the Bulge, was there the feeling among all the Allied troops that this is it? This is Hitler's last stand. If we can defeat him here, then we've won the war. Is that how a lot of people thought?
I think basically they was wanting to kind of come out and fight, because he had, up to that time, he had just more or less planned his feet, and this was what they was hoping for. There was a 4-star general that Homer Bradley, that he made the remark that he wished to hell he'd come out and fight, but they never figured that he could get that much strength, and that's what happened. He got all that manpower and tanks and everything, and where did he get it all from? And he just come at them. Well, he overrun this area and took it under German control, and that's what created this big bulge in the line, and that's why it was referred to as the Battle of the Bulge. It wasn't just in a small spot. That it was over an area of, a couple 100 miles, you know, and everybody was trapped into it. Not only Americans, but British and everybody else that was caught up in it, you know. It was a kind of a sorry time for everybody.
Was your job and the battle and the whole war experience for you, was it everything that you had expected before you went into the war?
Well, it was more than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't any way that I could tell you what it was all about, because it's something you'd have to experience, you know. But you just don't fight as an individual, you know. It's everybody, and everybody has to do his part. Because there was places where I can think that I wouldn't have wanted to have been, and that was like in London when Hitler bombed London so much, you know, or Dunkirk, or, you know, them people experienced something that I never.
Yep. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I think you're exactly right when you say that, you know, you have to live through it, you know, and it's something that is, you know, an effort of not just one individual, but, you know, everybody. You know, it's a team thing, looking out for each other. But I'm really thankful that you took the time to talk to us today.
Yeah.
Appreciate your service. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.